There's a great book, Die with Zero by Bill Perkins, who talks about really reframing the way you view your retirement, but really your whole life as memories. And there are many of you who, with the self-explanatory title, want to die with zero. Your goal is not to die with two, three, four, five, $20 million. You'd rather spend more when you have your energy and your health and the time to do it. Now, obviously, you don't want to run out of money. So there's a weird kind of balancing act you have to manage there. You could see I was getting so choked up about it. I'm like, what's the word I'm looking for? That balancing act of how do I make sure I spend to not have 10 million? How do I make sure I spend so I don't cut it too close? And now I'm 85 with some real big long-term care expenses. That is a really tough balance. Now, it is something we pride ourselves on doing here at Root and looking at withdrawal rates, which is a really fancy word that advisors made up, in my opinion, so we feel smarter than we are. The reality is, it's how much money are you taking from your portfolio so you can live? Now, most people have their portfolio, maybe there's Social Security, maybe there's rental properties, maybe there's inheritance, but it's very rare that everything's always on at the same time. For example, maybe you retire, you're 55, and you're like, I'm in a great spot. I want to retire and I want to die with zero. You might want to take more of your portfolio because this is the time you have your energy. You're 55, you're feeling good, you're traveling, you're eating cauliflower to stay in shape. If you know, you know. Now, the reality is you're probably going to need to take more from your portfolio because you don't have Social Security yet. Maybe there is no rental income, no inheritance. So it can feel weird. It's like, am I withdrawing too much? And I don't want to do that, put myself in a tough spot later. But the real risk is you're 85 or you're 90 or 95 and you're like, hey, I didn't spend, but I was actually in a pretty good spot to do so. So how do I even think about this? That's what we're going to go over in our new series, Root Drops, with one of my amazing advisors, Katie. Now, I don't make this stuff up. Guys, this was a question from you. Check this out. This was in our free community, the Root Collective. Rebecca Darling here says, die with zero. Seeing those withdrawal rates is hard. I'm not planning on a legacy value. Whatever my brother gets, he will enjoy spending. What's hard about this is looking at my withdrawal rates creep from the high threes into the 10s or 20s while hearing James Nari's voice of concerned disapproval. But what can I do besides hope my assumptions are good or conservative, that I get lucky on timing without trying to time the market? Periodic. I don't know why that made me think of the periodic table, but for some reason it just brought me back to high school right there, guys. I don't know if it did for you. Periodic reviews that hint next year I might need to either swap out a future bucket list trip for a modest one or put down deposits. You can see this person sounds like they're in a pretty good spot, but there's still that head trash of, hey, am I thinking through anything? Do I have to hope my assumptions are right? Let's get some insights from one of our advisors at Root who can help make us think maybe a little differently about this. Katie, any thoughts here?
Yeah, withdrawal rates. Love it. If you've heard of the 4% rule, which I assume many of you have, you probably know it's based on a study by Bill Bengen, and it provides a general guideline for how much you can withdraw in retirement safely. And it's really a flat 4% per year withdrawal with adjustments for inflation each year. It also assumes a traditional 30-year retirement using a balanced portfolio made up of S&P 500 and intermediate term bonds. So here at Root, we look at this. That's a good general rule of thumb, but we like to really look at it using more of a dynamic spending approach. When we actually look at retirement spending data, most retirees we see spend in what's more of a smile, right? It's got this curve to it where we typically see higher retirement spending on the front end. And this is oftentimes discretionary. So it's travel, it's hobbies, maybe they're golfing, maybe it's a home remodel, all sorts of things, but it tends to be higher at the front end of retirement while we are young and healthy and we've got the energy to do those things. In the middle years, it definitely tends to slow down, and then we see it start to peak back up in the later years of life. Typically, these are healthcare related expenses driving those withdrawal rates back up. So given that it's not typically for most people a flat 4% per year, we want to be able to use this more dynamic spending approach. And this is where truly spending can actually increase in periods of bull markets or perhaps tighten in market downturns. Taking this dynamic approach actually allows for higher average withdrawal rates over time. And a lot of this ties back to a study you all may have heard of, the Guyton-Klinger guardrails approach. So, to answer this question, here's kind of three practical things that you can do, especially if you're pre retirement, to protect your ability to spend in retirement. So, just three real practical tips here. Number one, you can make sure that your initial years of your retirement portfolio distributions are in a conservative bucket. So, here at Root, the way that we do this is we look at your projected income flows in retirement, your outflows, so your normal living expenses, more of your goal spending if you're traveling, things like that. And then we're going to look at the delta. So, what needs to be supplemented coming from your investment portfolio? At Root, we like to bucket this looking at the next 5 years of those portfolio distributions and place those in a conservative bucket. And the reason that we do that is that once we turn on your income, it allows us, if we have a market downturn, to pull from that conservative bucket and not have to go sell your equities at a loss. So, number two, another practical tip, choose well-diversified investments. This is not specific investment advice, but going back to that study with Bill Bengen, maybe consider instead of just owning the S&P 500, is it prudent to add in international or emerging markets exposure? Again, the big idea here is diversification. Does it give you more options that you could pull from in the event of a market downturn, assuming that not all asset classes are down at the same time? And then number three, once you actually start taking your distributions, if you experience a market downturn, especially if it's longer than kind of average, one option would be you could consider freezing those inflation adjustments, or you might even consider delaying certain discretionary spending if you have that level of flexibility, and that would allow your investments time to recover. So when it comes to withdrawal rates in retirement, it really is about balancing between protecting against the risk of running out of money, but also protecting against the risk of regret of not spending enough while you had the time, the energy, and the health to go do that. So going back to that Die with Zero book that we all love, Bill Perkins, he talks a lot about memory dividends. So here at Root, we encourage that. We want you guys to go get those memory dividends. We want you to ultimately get the most out of life with your money and spend while you're able to enjoy it.
The risk of regret. I love that. I'm going to steal that phrase from Katie, whether she knows it or not. I'm going to be talking about that all the time. I love looking at it through that lens of, yeah, there is a real risk to retiring early and running out, but there is a real risk to regret. And one of the things that we'll see often is someone says, there's no way I can retire. I mean, I just went in the software and I played around and it looks like, I'm going to have to take 10% of my portfolio. That's crazy. That's like way more than what I see anywhere else on the internet. And the reality is there are people who can still retire and they'll go, what do you mean, Ari? Isn't that like crazy high? We'll say that's 1 year where you're maybe buying a new car or helping out a child with a down payment or funding college. And then the rest of your retirement, your withdrawal rate's at about 2%, where we're going to be upset with you because we don't want you mad at us later. And you shared with us your goals were to spend more. So you shared you don't want to die with 10 million. It looks like you're on track for more. So the withdrawal rate, it's a constantly dynamic thing. We'll joke with people, specifically I will in my videos. I'll say, you know what I need you to do in retirement? I need you to be a retirement boxer where you're constantly kind of just looking, okay, I'm spending okay now. Maybe I should switch this, always kind of being willing to shift. And that's what leads to real success. So if you resonated with this episode and specifically with the way Katie was going over the risk of regret, thinking about this of withdrawal rates from that dynamic perspective, Katie is taking new clients and she helps clients who want to retire, who are in retirement, trying to optimize so that they're absolutely living their best life. We want you to retire and go, wow, I'm living my best life, doing what I want to do, spending my time on what matters most with who matters most. So if you go to our website, rootfinancial.com, in the upper right, you're going to see a little button and it says, see if you're a fit. If you click on that, you'll be prompted to answer just a few questions. From there, we'll be able to speak with you if it makes sense. Lastly, I ask, because all of this is free on YouTube, that you like this if you found it helpful. You comment below if there's something you learned, something that made you just go, wow, that is shifting the way I'm thinking about this. And then finally, number three, please share this with someone who you think might resonate with this content. We want to help as many people as possible, and we appreciate you. See you guys next time.